And this was one of the things that kind of drove me away from the Reformed tradition was a contemplation of the sacred, and just the notion that it's, there's this divorce between, the embodiment of the self in the church service. So it's almost like you're kind of a bunch of these disconnected minds all here in church to hear a theological message and think about it. And if anything, your body or your senses are a distraction, because you could be distracted by the stained glass windows. So you want to cover those up. Or you could be distracted if the pastor were to wear a robe of any kind. So you don't have that. And there's even a kind of fear that the songs would be too pretty. So you don't want that, because
it really is, in the end, it really is, in my estimation, a lack of incarnational thinking in general.
Right.
And I think that there's a kind of unconsciousness, which I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's on purpose. It's interesting because, for example, Calvin, in his refutation of icons and of sacred art, right, completely ignores St. John of Damascene's incarnational argument. And I think maybe he didn't even know it. It's possible that he didn't have access to that argument. So he acts as if it doesn't exist. And it's interesting because that's really the key to a lot of the modern problems in terms of the difference between this kind of disembodied mind that is just there in church to receive information, right, and think about it, rather than this embodied participation. So ultimately what you'll have is, it's inevitable. I remember I grew up in a Baptist church, and I mean, the people there were wonderful, like wonderful Christians. But I remember I would ask them, like, why don't we kneel in church? And they would say, well, because that's just an exterior, like, action. So, but we could kneel, but we could also not kneel. And so we don't, right? That's what ends up happening.
Sure, yeah, of course.
But in the end, we don't, and so there's the sense in which, instead of understanding, I think, in a proper Christian manner, even like in a biblical way, that like works are informed by your faith. That is, works are the embodiment of your faith. Even though if I told a Christian at that time that's the right way of thinking, they said, of course that is. But then there's something that happens because there's such a opposition of faith and works that ultimately all works, all exterior manifestations are almost seen as suspect at the outset, are seen as possibly idolatrous, and possibly, right, let's say, as a form of hypocrisy. Any form of outward gestures could be hypocritical. One of the structures I use to help people destroy that is to show how ritualized your every gesture is. That is, I tell people, okay, try it. Like, when you speak to someone, try to break the ritual. Like, do something else. Lie down on the ground. Start talking to the back of their head. Like, do all these things that are not expected of you, and see what happens. Like, you will see communion break down. You'll see the whole of society break down, and you realize that everything we do, from opening doors to driving cars, are all these kind of ritualized liturgical behaviors. And there is a manner in which we can be hypocritical. And I think Christ is constantly attacking hypocrisy, because there's something about the human person which can, let's say, disconnect the inner and the outer.
Yes.
And it's part of the fall. But that's the problem. The real, what we're trying to aim for is to connect them together so that so that one reflects the other, and we have a true kind of embodied incarnational behavior.
Yeah, there is no real internal authentic self that's divorced from how we react externally to things around us. We just can't live that way. It's an impossibility.
Once we fix the inner part, then the outer part will become a reflection.
Exactly. The goal is the alignment of the inner and outer self. Not to say the external things are bad and the internal things are good.